All right, what did you guys think of the exam? Everybody took the exam, right? Okay, I want us to talk about it for a minute. Oh shoot, I'm gonna need to find where that screen is. Exam 1, research methods, yes. Okay. I find it's good to do a little deep dive on the first exam so you guys know what my thinking was as a group. This was hopefully the exam you took. Yes? Okay. First question. Should you rely on intuition alone? No, right? We talked about that probably our first lecture together, that it may seem right? You may have a gut feeling that it sounds right, but why is it you shouldn't trust it?
Because it lends itself to a lot of biases that we don't even realize we have.
Exactly, right. So it's always best to go to the research method, where there's been objective research that's been done on far more than just your own personal experience, because so much about intuition is just, well, based on what I know, which is so limited compared to an entire scientific community. Good. All right, independent and dependent variable. Everyone should have gotten that. Hopefully that's something that's been clear since stats, so we'll skip over that for now. Question number 3. This was one I actually got quite a few text messages about. So when creating a research framework, how do we take big concepts and measure them? What were your thoughts on that?
I kind of thought it meant like, how do you survey large numbers of people, and like, how do you use the proper research methods to ensure that your framework is both externally and internally valid?
Okay, that's a very strong answer. I think more specifically with this was the idea of big concepts. Like, remember when we talked about happiness, right? How do we measure happiness? That's a big abstract concept. How do we operationalize it or measure it? So that's a bit of more the direction I was heading in. I'll take a look at the rest of your responses. And again, if everybody answered that way, because Sam, you're absolutely right. Part of the research framework is to utilize valid research. It's to utilize surveys that are strong and have been validated. But specifically, how do we take abstract concepts and bring it into a way that can be measured? Do you guys remember part of that conversation? So like with happiness, I would need to figure out, how am I going to measure it, right? So the first step is defining the big concept. How do I define happiness? So if happiness to me means consistent ratings of 8 or above on a scale of 10 on level of happiness, right? Then that's the way I'm operationalizing it. That's the way I will be measuring it. If it's, well, how often do people smile? Then I'm doing more of an observational study and I'm watching how often they smile. So again, I think we had a few charts in our lecture with these bigger abstract concepts and how do we operationalize them or measure them. Okay. 2 seminal research projects that highlight the need of ethics in research.
Tuskegee Airmen is one.
Yep. Very good. Any others?
And Milgram.
Milgram's another big one. Yep. All right. So the goal here was just to list them and then talk a little bit about what was discovered was unethical, right? If you included the Stanford prison experiment, which we talked about briefly, that would have been fine too. There are several research, like seminal research studies that point to ethics being necessary. Those are just the 2 main ones we talked about in class. Okay, you are researching the concept of gratitude in teenagers. Provide a brief description of a research designed for a study on gratitude using each method of assessment: self-report, observational, and physiological. Okay, that was a bigger question. So what would that look like?
You wanted us to actually lay out some of the methods and work through, like, kind of be creative and make up our own experiment for each of those, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you were doing an experiment on gratitude with teens and you wanted to use a self-report, what would that look like?
I believe for my exam, I just wrote that maybe you'd find a sample size from a school population, a population of students or something, and then expose, just write up a number of questions and have them take questionnaires.
Okay, so very good. Yeah, self-report is you are asking the participant to provide an honest assessment of your research question. So it could be asking like, how often do you say thank you after you've received something, or how do you feel grateful? You know, but something about asking a question. Okay, good. What would observational study? What would that look like?
I think for my exam, I just put that maybe go to a school and just kind of assess students. I think I actually maybe put some preconditions as well, like expose them to like a certain condition and then exposed another group to a certain condition.
Okay, so you made it in an experimental group. Okay. Yeah. I think observational study, you're right on there, Greg, in terms of you're going someplace and observing a behavior. So this could be, you know, going, like you said, to a school and waiting in the cafeteria as people got their lunches and seeing how they express gratitude.
Okay. I feel like I had a hard time thinking of somewhere, like I think I made preconditions because I had a hard time thinking like where could you just go to find like where someone is being actively
grateful.
gracious. Yes.
Yeah. Which, isn't that a sad world we're in? Where you're like, where are people grateful? But you're totally right. So one of the conditions you could have done was, I'm going to open the door and hold the door open for groups of students and see what kind of response they get. So yeah, that would be another one. But yeah, so the idea again, an observational study is you are visually observing and looking for the behavior. So you would need to define what it looks like. So saying thanks, thank you, whatever, and then that would fall in that category. Now, physiological is, I think, where people got hung up. What would a measure of, how would we measure physiological?
Could you do like a brain scan for that?
Yeah. So again, this is not the easiest. This is why physiological doesn't get used all that often, because yes, you would need some sort of brain scan. Sorry, they're playing, they're not killing each other, I promise. But yes, you could do a brain scan. So as somebody's in a brain scan, like in either an MRI machine, something like that, then you would introduce some sort of story that would elicit the sense of gratefulness, and you would see the areas of the brain that would light up. Totally. That'd be something you could do. Is it cost effective? Probably not, right? So if on this one I had said, you want to test out the concept of stress with college students, you could ask a self-report. You could observe certain behavior like shaking your leg maybe, or like pacing or biting fingernails. Those are like stress behaviors. And physiological could be measuring heart rate or sweat glands, right? Like, so that would be maybe a little simpler, but with a concept of gratitude, a brain scan would work too. Okay, questions about that, or does that make sense now? Okay. What are 3 types of reliability and measurement, and why are they important? Several types of reliability, right? What do we have? We do construct, content, test, retest, inter-rater. Any others? Convergent. No, that's validity. Was that a pretty straightforward question?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what is the role of validity in research? Right, so the role of validity is we're wanting to make sure that we're measuring what we say we're measuring, right? So without a valid tool, we could be reliable. So again, you can have reliability without validity. Think of the broken scale. But you want to make sure that you are using a valid assessment and measurement of your concept. Otherwise, I can't say that I'm assessing research method by giving you a test in French, right? That would not be adequate. All right, next question is, what are some limitations of self-report measures? There's many here. What were some of your thoughts?
I think I talked about like how sometimes the participants will like falsely say their answers, like kind of be fake.
Right, so it's susceptible to faking good or faking bad. Yep. Anything else? Another big piece is it's face valid, right? So it's going to be obvious for the participants to know most often what it is you're asking. So again, it's more easily, manipulated in a way by the participant. Okay. Okay, last one. You're interested in understanding voting behavior in young adults. You decide to give out a self-report questionnaire to people who walk into a local Starbucks near your office who look like they're in the 18 to 25 age range. You analyze your data and attempt to publish it under the title, Young Americans Voting Patterns, a Sample of Everyday American Youth. What may be wrong with this research design? There are a few things here.
It's hard to say that, like, to say generalizing like young Americans, because when you walk into a Starbucks, first of all, Starbucks, it depends what location you're in, because you could be in a higher end neighborhood which doesn't have all of the people that like you're testing, so you can't really generalize, and it doesn't have like it's false with socioeconomic issues.
Yep.
And so the Starbucks is not really the location where you should go and generalize
Right.
young Americans.
So sorry, he just knocked something down. Hold on. Come here. Got my daughter's little American Girl dog. No. All right. Anything else? That was very good.
The age, like you can't really say someone looks 18 or 25. That's, I don't know. I've been told I look like I'm like 15, so that's not really
Oh,
reliable.
so there you go. Yeah. That's exactly right. You don't want to make assumptions. We never want to do that in research. That's the last thing we want to do. Okay. And then how about giving out a survey where the person like is in front of you about voting, it's voting patterns, right? So anything about self-report and politics that might make people feel one way or the other.
Well, also I wrote about like people's views can change if they're with a group of people and they're filling it out like next to each other.
Exactly.
Their friends, especially during this age, if their friends are filling out like this way, then they can just fill it out that way because they're
Right.
doing it with a group.
And social pressures, absolutely. And then one might even say that a Starbucks, people of a certain political view may be more likely to go to Starbucks than another, right? That it may not be an equal ground to get a true sense of how people feel about politics. Okay, good. Sounds like you guys really thought that through. Okay, any other questions about the exam that I can help answer? Pretty straightforward. Okay, good. That was very much the goal, was for it to be straightforward and yeah, just straightforward. Okay, let's see here. I need to make this big now. Okay. I'm going to switch gears and talk about, oh, why is this not there again? I'm always on the struggle bus, you guys. Why can't I figure out my life and Zoom? Here, let's put it on this other screen. Here it is. All right, can you guys see this? All right, let's talk about the qualitative research assignment. So all of next week, we are not meeting in class because I want you guys to have the opportunity to complete this assignment. I recognize that for some of you, doing it early in the morning may be challenging, especially with transportation. So I want to show as much grace as possible. So that's why you can have any of the time, hopefully you can get this done. You have all of next week to get it done. So the goal is to spend a fair amount of time, I would say minimum of 30 minutes at a given location where you will be observing a behavior. Now, I've listed 3 options here and I want us to go through them, but then I want us to also think through if there's anything else that we could add to that. So option A would be to go to a grocery store, or it could be a Target, Meijer, or Walmart, and observe for 30 minutes the cart return behavior of shoppers. I want you to make notes as to whether they bring it back to the cart corral, if they bring it back inside, or if they leave it near their car. And I want you to think beforehand, what is your hypothesis? So in the past, and I think we've talked about this briefly already, in the past, students had said, well, my hypothesis is if people are by themselves, they are less likely to return the cart, either back inside to the corral or anywhere else. They're more likely to leave it by their car than if they're in a group. Or if it's an adult with children, then they're less likely to return it, kind of like they're wrangling everybody back in, right? So that would be a behavior you could observe, is the return of the cart. Again, how can you do that in a non-creepy way? You can be in your car parked in the parking lot just with your, notebook, and then see what's written and, observe it for 30 minutes and take some notes. Now, the important piece, and I'm going to need to figure out a way to do that. Let's see if I can draw. Okay, let's see if this works. So this would be, can you guys see what I'm writing? Okay, so you would write corral, oh boy. And I think that's actually, that's right. And then you'd say inside, let's say, okay. And then by car. Okay, so you would have in your notebook, you would have it like this, okay? And then here you'd write whatever your hypothesis would be. So let's say you think it's a gender thing, that women are more likely to return it than men, or vice versa. Or you could do age, but again, we just talked about that on the exam. Age can be a little tricky, right? And unless you make it very clear, like teenager, adult, or like elderly, which no, don't do that, because then you might call somebody elderly and they're not. But let's say this would be just one person, and this would be 2 and more, right? Okay. And then you would look through for your 30 minutes and have dashes like this. Okay, these people all did it in the corral. One person went inside here, couple went inside by the car. I'm just making up data here, okay? But this is what it would look like. So you would have some sort of frequency table that you create based on the observation that you have seen, okay? So that is for option 1. Does this make sense, the cart example? Okay. All right. Now, the second one would be go to a coffee shop. And I think I was at a Starbucks yesterday. You couldn't linger inside the Starbucks though. But you can pick, a different, the restaurants are open now, but I don't want you guys to be in a restaurant for 30 minutes unless you're like you yourself eating. Anyway, choose whatever you feel comfortable with if you choose the second option. So some sort of restaurant or coffee shop where people are placing orders. That's the biggest thing. So it would have to be some sort of fast food place. And then watch patron behavior. And this one's pretty wide. You can really pick quite a bit. So you can look at order type, whether they order to go or stay for their order, how they go about ordering, any of those. So one example, especially, during COVID, you could say like, oh, are people more likely to go into a fast food place and grab it to go rather than sit down? I think that may naturally skew towards to go just because of the nature of where we're at right now in the world. The other thing you could do is if you're going to a coffee shop is seeing, are people mostly ordering coffee or are they ordering coffee and food with their items? And then you could look at that in terms of time of day. So this would be a good one that you could go twice because you have some time next week. So it could be like this. So drink. Oh my goodness, you guys. I promise I write better than that when it's not on my mouse. And this would be food and drink. Okay. And then you could do this that was, you know, let's say you went at 9 a.m. and let's say you went again and it was 4 p.m. Okay. And then you could do some sort of hypothesis as to what you thought that maybe in the morning, people were more likely to get like a breakfast sandwich or something along with their order. And at night, it was just really drinks. Okay. Making up data here again. Okay. So then this is what you would write for it. That's just an idea of doing drink versus food. This would be for a coffee shop. The other thing you could do is how likely are people going to be, where's my phone? You know, you get those people who are like chatting on the phone and like, yeah, no, I'll take a number 2, you know, like they don't even put their phone down or they're on their phone, like actively, you know, texting or whatever. So that could be a behavior. Do they put their phones down? Did they place the order without a phone? Or did they go through? Now, another option, and this would really work right now pretty well for COVID, is that they pick up an order that they had ordered online or that they order in person. So you see like somebody who just went on the website, ordered it in advance, just grabbed it. Same thing can be done at Starbucks if you do a mobile order versus order it in the store. You can see a difference there too. But the whole point is before you're, oh, somebody got kicked out. Before you go through and observe, you need to know what your hypothesis is so that you can set up your framework adequately, right? If I don't know that I'm interested in drink versus food and drink, then I'm just watching people, and that's not going to be reliable information because I'm just going to be overwhelmed by everything I'm seeing. So you need to really have it be systematized beforehand. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. And then the last one would be select a different store, street, restaurant, or campus and observe behaviors for 30 minutes. Now I've had students use this one and go in the library. Is the library open right now? I think it was last fall. So yeah. And then they sat and just observed, are people studying on their own or with somebody else? Do they have books open? Do they seem like they're getting distracted by their cell phones or other things? Are they listening to music versus not? So there's lots of behaviors you can observe. So again, you don't necessarily need to go far to do this. You could stay on campus. And even the coffee shop and food idea, you can go on campus for on-campus housing and see what they do there too. Not on-campus housing, like your commons, your dining hall, or coffee shop on the campus. So that's another possibility. All right, so are there, and in there you could also include the mall. I believe the mall is open and you could see what does it look like? Are people mostly shopping? Now you got to be careful. Like that one I had a student do last year, like are people mostly shopping at the mall or are they just walking? Because you get so many people just working out inside, especially when it's cold. But if you have that many people you're measuring, you may miss some or double count them. So you've got to be thoughtful on how you'll do your measurement. Because that person ended up having like 200 people that they counted throughout their 30 minutes. So that's quite a bit to keep track of. Okay, questions about where to go and how to do it? Do any of you have another idea that you're like, oh, this is what I'm thinking of doing? Maybe I should swing by the professor first. Answer is yes. I don't want any bathroom. I told you all that example. And I was like, oh, did I tell you all that example? Hand washing in the public?
Yeah.
Did I not? I did. Okay, yeah. So any other ideas that you guys would like to do? Okay. Sounds like no. It'll be one of these three. All right. So, oh yeah.
Sorry, there's a lot of noise going on. So I'm actually in Costa Rica right now. So I think I can't really do either of the first two. But I could do like a restaurant, but I don't.
I'm having a really hard time hearing you actually, Ada. Hold on. I want to make sure it's not on my end. Okay, what were you saying?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're just really low. I don't know why, but that's okay. I'm going to focus.
Well, I'm in Costa Rica right now, so I can't really do the first two. But
Yes, that would be a problem.
so I don't really know what like I would do, but I could go to a restaurant or do something else in the grocery store.
Yes. Yeah, because they probably don't have carts. You could do any restaurant that would work or any behavior that would be more common over there. So it could be, and I've never been to Costa Rica, so I'm speaking outside my realm of expertise here, but if they have, let's say, a street market and you see different behaviors, are people haggling versus not? Are they carrying their own? I mean, I don't know, I'm coming up with random stuff here. Are you near a beach? We could look at beach behavior.
Not really. I'm going into town today though, so I was thinking about just doing this. We're going to the grocery store and maybe like a restaurant.
Yeah. And then think of like, so for you and for any of you actually, once you get to the setting where you're going to be observing, spend a couple minutes just looking out. Like, what is it you see and what you came in to measure? Does it still make sense? Because I have seen it where students are like, oh, I decided to go with Trader Joe's. Well, most people just return their cart as soon as they get out of Trader Joe's. So now you need to think of something else, right? So you can adjust as you get to your setting so that you have the best possible measurement that you can do. Does that make sense? Okay. So then the goal is to write out this frequency table and then look to see first, what was your hypothesis? Because you need to go back to what it is you thought. Much like in research, any research really, you are looking to confirm or refute your hypothesis, right? Those are the two options. Did I see what I expected to see, or did something totally different happen, right? So you need to have your hypothesis written down first. So I expect that people who are going to Starbucks at 9 a.m. will order, there'll be a greater number of people who order food and a drink than just a drink. Okay, that's my hypothesis. Then I sit in and observe for 30 minutes and I see if that, my frequency of my behavior matches what I expected. Okay, once you are done creating your frequency table, you need to create a 2 to 3 paragraph report on your findings. Now, this will just be, I decided to go and observe X behavior at X location. My hypothesis was X. That should be paragraph number 1. Very straightforward. Paragraph number 2 will state, this is what I found. I was there for 30 minutes and I observed that in fact, my hypothesis was confirmed by the observations I made. Oh my gosh, they're being crazy this morning. And here are my numbers. And then you can include your little frequency table, or you could describe it with words if you'd rather do that. So out of the 110 people I observed at the grocery store, 50 of them returned their carts and 60 of them did not. And of those 60 who did not, 40 of them happened to be by themselves and the other 20 were in groups. So there are a greater number who were solo shoppers who didn't return their carts, which aligned with my hypothesis. Just making up numbers here, okay? But that's the goal, is to report then on your findings. There is a spot on our Course Connect page for you to submit that. So that'll be the assignment you need to submit next week by the end of Friday. And then be prepared during week 9, which is the week after that, to spend like a 5-minute quick overview of what it is that you discovered. So it just needs to be quick, like, hey, I decided to go to the grocery store. I was interested in cart return. I must have gone at a terrible time because there were only 15 people. Of those 15, 12 of them actually returned their carts. So people behaved far better than I thought they would, something like that. So this is the way you would just then explain it in class, just a quick 5-minute quick overview so we can learn from one another. And then especially if I'll organize it so that those who do option A, the grocery store, you get clumped as a group so we can kind of hear how similar or not your hypothesis and findings were. Okay, you do not need a PowerPoint presentation. the goal of this is to just be like a literal, just quick 5-minute overview of your findings. I don't want you guys to spend a ton of time on this. Okay?
So it's totally okay if we did want to do the grocery store thing, we could do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I have
cool,
that
okay.
as, what's that?
I just didn't know if you wanted us to more come up with something on our own. I know you said that, I know you put that out there for the class, but I like if I had an idea in the next couple of days or something.
Yeah, no, it's so again, the grocery store and the coffee shop or restaurant behavior, those are completely fine options. But if you're like, I don't live near a grocery store, or like you're in Ada's position, you're like, there's grocery stores, but no carts. And, you know, I'm not super comfortable going to a restaurant for 30 minutes. I want you guys to feel safe. Then that's why there's option C. Find something else that you would feel comfortable doing. I just like to
Okay, awesome.
yeah, just the asterisk to option C is check in with me so that we don't end up with
Okay.
awkward behavior.
I guess I thought you wanted us to lean more towards option C than I thought you did.
Oh, no,
Okay.
I don't have a vested interest in whichever one that you do.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Any other questions I can help answer?
Thank you.
Yeah, would I be able to do kind of a comparative analysis between two stores? So see, like, go to one store and then go to another store to see like return patterns?
Absolutely. So then it would look a little bit like this. So let's say, I'm going to make stuff up here. Let's say you do Walmart. And then let's just do this, Target, okay? Oh, no, I'm not doing that. That's not, okay. Walmart and Target. Okay, let's say that's what I'm doing, right? And then you're just saying, yes, they returned it. No, they did not return it. You could absolutely do something like that.
Okay.
Is that what you were thinking? Something?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then I would make it a little bit more simple. Here's what I would not do, and I've had students do that. I'm going to compare Walmart and Target, multiple people versus single shopper, and whether they returned it inside, corral, or left it at the car. Because now all of a sudden we have a 3x2x2 design, right? So then all of a sudden you'd have Walmart, and then you'd have single shopper, multiple shopper, Target, single shopper, multiple shopper, right? Like, and then over here it'd be like corral, inside, and then car, right? It just gets real messy real fast. So just keep it a little simpler. Make sense? And again, it could be the same store, but different time of day. Sometimes that's a good way of comparing too, because then you could see like, or weather. I've had this happen last winter where somebody was like, it was pouring rain when I went, which made observation hard because I had a hard time seeing through the window, but also almost no one came out with a cart. They were just like lugging all their groceries like they were a tree because they didn't want to deal with something else. So that's kind of an unusual situation. But let's face it, in observational research, that you have to account for that, right? There's just going to be those times where like, this is the day we measure, and you end up having kind of an anomaly happen because of weather, because type of people, because you're measuring on a day that all of a sudden something happens in the news, right? And people aren't leaving their house or whatnot. So that's part of the discussion that would be beneficial to add. So when you talk about that second paragraph, and you discuss your findings, it would be helpful to include if anything came out not the way you expected, why you think it wasn't the way you expected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for our for like the report, the paragraphs, do we need to include the table that we've took notes of?
It's up to you. So like I was saying earlier, you could either include the table or you could write it in text. My brain functions well with tables, but I never want anyone to be like, well, this is taking me a half an hour now because I have to insert a table in Word and I don't know how to do that. That's not the goal of this class, is not learning how to format in Word. So if you would rather just write it out, that's totally fine too.
Can we like take a picture of our table and like put it in?
You can, but what I'm finding is it's hard for people to submit more than one document oftentimes on the assignment. So then if you submit your paper in Word and then you want to take a photo, you could try to upload that too. In my other section, I had students that really struggled with that. And then they would email it to me and I get like 60 emails or so per day. So then it gets buried and I'm like, did I actually get it? So yeah. My goodness, I don't know what's going on with them. Okay, we're good with this? Okay, then I want us to move on real quick. Before we go into lecture, I want us to briefly discuss the syllabus yet again, just so we're all on the same page for that. Here it is. Did you guys hear that? He said a mega burp. You're being so gross, doggy. What's going on? Ouch, ouch, ouch. All right. So this is what's coming up. So we've had our week 6 again. This is funky. We've adjusted week 7 and 8. In fact, this feels unhelpful to have. Oh, actually, no, that is what I want to show you guys. So just don't pay attention to this bit because we know what we're doing, right? So this week is week 7. Week 7, we're discussing the exam and the qualitative research. Week 8 is qualitative research. So again, don't worry about what's written here. We have the edited syllabus that's on our announcement page. What I want you guys to pay attention to is the reference, what is due. So week 8, which is next week by the 12th, you need to submit your references to me for your research paper, okay? And week 9, which is the week right after, which is then by the 19th, you need to submit your intro or literature review by the end of the night. You know, I'm happy to fudge that to make it a little later. So I wanted us to do a quick check-in. How are you guys doing with your research papers? Are people starting to do the research and gathering articles? Yes. Okay, good. Because the last thing I want is for us to go over that again next week and you'd be like, because next week we're not meeting. So Friday, I will reiterate this, but I want you guys to keep that on track. Now, what is my expectation? For the reference section, it should just be a literal reference list of your research articles in APA format. Okay, so make sure that the articles you have selected are actually written in APA format. Don't just, oftentimes I'll have students just copy and paste the title. That's not APA. So make sure that you follow the APA guideline so that you're doing authors, year, research article, research journal, all of that. Okay. So that should be 10 to 15 articles that are relevant to your specific course of study. As I've mentioned before, in your groups, you may very well have completely different research references, and that is okay because you are each independently writing your paper. Okay. Now, the week after that, you need to discuss your introduction. You need to submit your literature review or the intro paragraph or intro chapter is usually what it's called, where you are submitting to me what we talked about of what is an integrated research literature review, okay? Which is gathering those studies that you had in your references and then finding the common denominator so you have subheadings so it's neatly organized. And then you provide a summary of those and how they go together. And then at the end, you tell me what is your hypothesis in terms of what you expect to find. Questions about that? We have a lot of writing coming up. So I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page that these are coming up due very soon. Okay, so next week, by the end of the week, the reference list is due. And the week after that, so that is by the 19th of March, you need to have your literature review completed. And I know the 19th feels like forever from now because it's just March 2nd, but it goes by fast. So I just want to make sure everybody is successful in keeping that in the forefront of their mind.
How many
Okay.
pages does the literature review have to be?
I don't like doing page requirements. Like it's really just however it feels that you have been able to provide a broad enough and deep enough analysis into your topic. So, and I want to be clear, I would like you to include a title page, but you do not need an abstract. Okay. And so then when I look at pages of content, I would say 4 to 6 of content. That means that is excluding the title page, that is excluding your reference page. It should just be the content of your writing. And it should, of course, follow APA guidelines in terms of formatting. So it should be double space. If you're not sure as to which font to use or font size, look back on your APA manual. I honestly, this was 3 years ago, I did have a student submit to me a paper in the Comic Sans, whatever, like the font that looks like kid writing. I was like, what is happening? Why would you want your professor grumpy as they're grading your paper? I don't get that. Okay, so this is what's on the schedule. We good? All right, then let's dive in to lecture. I know we don't have a ton of time now, but this felt important to just go over. Here we are. So we won't get a chance to cover all of it today, just because of time, and that's okay. We'll finish it on Friday. All right. Everybody see this? Okay, so we have talked a lot about descriptive ways of doing studies, right? So how many people have done this, right? More of a counting and frequency. And certainly with your observational study, you are doing a frequency type of study. But a lot of research has to do with kind of associative patterns. We talked about that before, like what is the relationship between different variables? And the way that we do that is through bivariate correlational research, okay? So hopefully this is not a new concept. You guys have all talked about correlation before. Stats, maybe it's like ringing a little bell. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So first we're going to introduce what is a bivariate correlation, and then we will look at how we can actually pose questions of research with association claims. And within that, we'll talk about construct validity and statistical validity, which both are extremely important when you're doing correlational studies. Okay. So what is a correlational study? Let's see here. So it's when you are looking at the relationship between two variables. It has to be only two variables. That's why it's called bivariate, two variables, okay? And again, correlation is the association or the relationship between those two variables, okay? So this is sample data from a study on well-being and deep talk. So this is the score that they received on a well-being scale. And this is the percentage of the conversation that they rated as deep talk. Okay. So based on this, the hypothesis of the authors may have been the higher your score on a well-being scale, the greater you're involved in deep conversation, like deep talk, not just like, hey, how's it going? Oh, good. Oh, it's warm outside. Oh, great. Okay, have a good day, right? Very surfacey, but how well you're able to go into deep, more personal and vulnerable conversation, okay? So you can see the scores here range from 2.8 for person ZZ all the way up to 4.5. And the percentage of conversation rated as deep talk, which would be a self-report, the individual would say how much of your daily talk is superficial versus deep, range from 16% to 80%, okay? Eyeballing it, what do you suspect is the relationship between these two variables?
No relationship.
No relationship? Is that what you said? Okay. Well, first, it's kind of hard just eyeballing it, right? So what would be a way to make it a little easier? I am a geek, so I would graph it. All right, so let's do that. Oh, there we go. All right. So we're gonna have here on this side, oh, I made it too far over. So this will be percentage of deep talk, okay? So, and maybe I'll do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, okay? And then over here, it'll be the score on the well-being scale. So well-being scale, and I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So if I'm graphing the scores of person A, the score on the well-being scale is 4.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I go right here in between, right? That's 4.5. And then 80, which is like right at the very top. Okay. Person B scored a 3, so 1, 2, 3, and a 52. So then I do 10, 20, 30, 40, 52 or so. Okay. 3.2 would be right over here, and they got a 35. Then person D is a 4.1 and a 42. And then ZZ was 2.8 and 16. Okay, now that I have this graphed beautifully and very accurately, not, you would obviously use a ruler and make it a lot nicer. What do you suspect is the relationship now that you can see it this way?
It seems that well-being indicates that you have more deep conversations.
Yes, so the relationship between these variables seems to suggest that as your well-being score increases, so does the percentage of deep talk. And the way I see that is if I have this line of best fit, right? If I were to create a line that's equally between all the dots, it would be like this. And now going back to our geometry of middle school, what would be the slope of that line? You guys remember slope? Or are you like, I've blacked that out. That's a repressed memory.
Do you mean like the actual slope or just like if
Yeah.
it's negative or positive?
Well, I guess we could start with negative or positive. What do you think, Sam?
Positive?
Positive.
Okay,
Said
good.
it with a lot of confidence. You're like,
No, because then I started to second guess myself.
Yeah.
I did not do well in geometry.
all right, so the slope of a line, right? Y equals mx plus b, right? Where b is your y-intercept. The idea is if this is positive, that means as one variable goes up, the other variable goes up. So in fact, this would likely be if we looked at the slope, it'd probably be closer to 1. I don't know why I just wrote an X here, but it'd probably be close to 1. Because as one variable goes up 1, the other one tends to go up 1. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, so to speak, okay? Why do we do that? Why do we care about the relationship between those two? Why do we care about a line and predictive power and all that? Why do we care about that? You're like, Dr. Wolto, please tell us because we don't know why you're talking about that. Okay, I'll inform you. The reason why is if we are able to see a pattern between two behaviors, right? And we're able to map it out and we've created a line of best fit and we know the slope, then if all of a sudden somebody tells you, hey guys, I don't know, I'm just curious, like somebody who has a percentage of deep talk at 5%, do you think those are pretty happy people? They're asking you to make a prediction on one of those variables. Now, predictions inherently are not perfect, but we have data here that is showing us the higher your percentage of deep talk, the higher your level of well-being, right, on this particular scale. So if you give me a percentage of deep talk that's very low, based on the data, that tells me that person will likely have a very low well-being scale score. Okay. Now, again, why do we care about that? These are two random variables that maybe we don't care. Now let's talk about things that we do care about. If I know that there's a strong relationship in reoffending with a particular forensic population, right? I have data that suggests if somebody continues to act in behavior A, they are likely to reoffend. And I am the one deciding whether they get to be released from prison. Ooh, now maybe I do care. Maybe I do want to use those predictions, right? So then I can look at this variable, this behavior they may be engaging in right now, and say that has been shown to be linked to a higher rate of reoffense. Ergo, this person cannot be released because this is too risky for the population at large. So that's how we would use this type of statistics and research analysis to make day-to-day decisions. Does that make sense? It's the same thing we do in the medical field too, right? If you have somebody that you know is interested in bariatric surgery, for instance, where they reduce the size of your stomach for weight loss, and you see certain behaviors that through the course of their training, because they have to be in therapy and all that beforehand, you see these indicators that show higher levels of risk, they may not be a good fit for the procedure. So we use this really all the time. If you think about the rate on your car insurance, right? There are certain factors that or variables that they measure as greater likelihood to get in a car crash. So they're going to charge you more money because they're figuring out that it's going to cost them more to insure you as an individual for whatever this behavior is. Maybe you can do it reverse too, right? Maybe you have a really high GPA, and that to them is correlated with the lower risk of scores. I think maybe my next one, let me clear this up real quick so that we can, so I can show you that example. Okay, so if I was doing an analysis on GPA and rate of accidents, okay, where this is GPA, and then accidents, okay, and then let's do 4 accidents, and then GPA is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, guys, this is not real data. I'm making stuff up. So if you're like, this is highly insulting to me, I don't mean it to be that way. I do know that that is a discount that insurance companies will give. Maybe some of you guys have that already. So student here who has a GPA of 4.0, and this should actually start at 0, right? So this is not a perfect scale, but let's say they've been in 0 accident. And then we have a 4.0 student that maybe has had 1 accident. Okay, and then we've got 2.0 that's been in 2 and 1, you know, so you might get something like that. Okay, oh boy. And this would be the line of best fit. So the relationship would say the higher your GPA, the less likely you are to have an accident. So see how now it's the higher you go up here, the lower you go on this axis. This would be a negative relationship. As one variable goes up, the other one goes down. So this is a mistake students often make, is they think a negative relationship implies that it's like a negative thing is happening, right? Like that's not what it means. It's just that the relationship is opposite. In fact, it's that your slope is negative, right? So it'd be like negative 0.1. That's why it's called negative. It has nothing to do with the content of the variable you're measuring. Okay, let's go to the next slide now that I perhaps have confused you. So here's other pieces of information. This is other studies. So this is the media multitasking inventory, and it looks at the frequency that they multitask and their ability at multitasking. So this is how often these students engage. So this is their score for multitasking frequency. And this is how accurate they are at the task where they're multitasking, okay? If you just eyeball it, can we make any sort of predictions here? Or what do we notice? So again, my recommendation would always be to stick it in a graph so you can really see it. If you're super visual and you're able to see this, you might notice this. What's going on here?
Seems like the higher score for multitasking, the less accurate the score
Right.
is.
All right, so I can, that's, and I think, was that Ada? I didn't, or
Oh,
Eliza, sorry. So absolutely, so the people, this is Max. Max is like, I multitask all the time. I'm engaging in like 18 different activities at the same time. And his score on the task during multitasking was the lowest. So now we have somebody who has the highest frequency in multitasking and the lowest accuracy score, okay? So we're already set up by this one score, I'm seeing a negative relationship. But we can't just use one score, right? Why not? Why can't we just use one score?
There's so many other factors that could be influencing the theta if it's just one person.
I didn't hear all of that, Ada, but you said it. There's so many other factors. And it could be that Max may be an outlier. Maybe Max is just really bad at multitasking, but most other people are just fine. So then really the only way for me to know is to start mapping it out, okay? So if this is here, the accuracy score, and we'll start, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80%. And then over here, we'll do all the way up to 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so mapping Alec, his score is 3.65, so right before 4, and his accuracy was 27%. So we'll do that. Then 4.21 here to 48. 2.06 to 62. I think that. Right here. 8.44 to 25. And then 4.56 to 32. Okay, and what do we notice here? I would say this would be the line of best fit. Okay, what kind of relationship is that? Positive or negative?
Negative.
Negative. Okay, meaning as one variable goes up, the frequency they multitask, the other variable decreases, which is the accuracy, percentage accuracy. Okay. This is another one here. This is the Casiopo study on marital satisfaction. Where did they meet their spouse, online or offline, and marital satisfaction? So this is kind of an interesting one because you have just a yes, no. So this is, let's say online, and this is offline, okay? And then it goes up to 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So online we've got 3, 6, offline at 5, online at 7, offline at 4, online at 7. Okay. What do we think about that? This is a much harder one because you have but this is an actual like dichotomous variable. This is a yes, no, on, off, right? So you cannot draw a line. Well, you can, it looks like that, right? From one to the other, but you get clusters rather than a nice neat line. These are scores for two continuous variable or interval ratio variable. This is a dichotomous variable and an interval ratio variable. So just a little bit different, but we can still see that somehow we can compare between the two. This, I think, would lend itself better to a t-test rather than a correlation, but again, do something like that. Bottom line is you're looking at two variables and their relationship. That's really the goal of correlations. Okay, so I just said that. You're describing associations between two quantitative variables. Or you could be describing associations with categorical data. That's the marriage study that we just looked at a minute ago. All right, so looking at it for two quantitative variables. So again, you're taking a peek here. The best way to do that is if you go from a table that describes your data is to graph it. Once you graph it, you can see the pattern a little bit more simply. So this is, again, this is a scatter plot from this deep talk and the well-being scale. You can see how everything is rated here. They converted the well-being scale as a Z-score so that you're able to see kind of where your mean ends up being, and then the percentage of deep talk, okay? So from this, you see the line of best fit goes through the middle here, which shows that as one variable goes up, the other variable goes up as well. So the first thing you need to identify is what is the direction? Is it a positive or negative correlation? So what do we think for this one?
Positive.
Positive. Now, the second question is how strong of a relationship do they have? Okay, so if we go back again to like geometry, if I have a perfect one-to-one relationship, like this 90-degree angle that goes up, that's because every time one variable goes up, the other one goes up by the same amount. So that is a perfectly correlated relationship, right? Identical. As one goes up, the other one goes up in the same increment. Now, how likely is that to happen where you have a correlational score, which is denoted by R? How often is it that you think it is a 1?
Not often.
Like never, practically. Very, very, very rare. Because you are saying that those two variables perfectly relate to one another. And now I'd like to say it's the same thing if it was like this. If it was a perfect R equals negative 1.0, also extremely rare. Those are the strongest of associations when you're at the tail, because this is the range of score. Correlations range between 1 to -1. Okay. And once you're at those extreme numbers, those are the strongest relationships. And that's it. In other words, it's to say, really, this variable and this other one together, they are so perfectly aligned that they, as one goes up, the other one goes up. So there's no other variable influencing it, right? They are themselves the biggest influencers. And if you think about that, there's really nothing in life that's that clear. Now, the goal, obviously, when you're doing research is to get to a point where you get as close to 1 or -1 as possible. That shows the strongest correlation, okay? And as you can see by this table right here, really anything that's greater than 0.5, positive or negative, because again, this is not a bad thing to be -0.5, it just shows the direction of the line. That is a large or a strong correlation. If you're at a 0.1, that's a small or weak correlation, okay? And then 0.3, you'd call that medium or moderate. So now let's look back at this. What do we think this would fall into? Just eyeballing it. Maybe I'm not being clear. So if this type of line is the strongest, that would be an R of 1, then the closer I get to like something like this, and then something like that, those are going to be weaker. And ultimately, if you have a correlation that's like this, that's an R of 0. That means there is no relationship between the two. So that's how that would visually look. So this kind of line might be a weak, right? And this may be moderate. And obviously this top one would be strong. So based on this one, and I can tell you, I think I have it in my notes here, that is an R, whoops, where did it go? This is R of 0.28. So it would fall between these two. right? Which kind of is supported when you look at the line. You're like, well, it's not a flat line. There's definitely a relationship, but it's not a straight one relationship either. It's weaker than that. Okay, is that making sense? Okay, let's do one more. All right. Here's two more. So this is a multitasking ability. That's a score they get on a specific test, and the frequency of media multitasking. So that's a score they get on that. Looking at it, would you say that the correlation is positive, negative, or no correlation?
It looks like it has no correlation.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with Sam because it kind of just looks like it's everywhere. So
And this is a tricky one because yes, I mean, we see that the highest scores for the most part tend to be clumped over here with fewer scores over here. So I think this one would probably be something like this. Because more scores are in this quadrant. Okay, so this one, now let me ask you this. Let me erase that for a second. Okay. If I am telling you now that the correlational score for this one is negative 0.19, what is it a positive or negative correlation?
Negative,
Negative. How do we know that?
because it's negative 0.19.
Because you're like, number's negative. So yes, 100%. Now, what about the strength of the relationship?
Would that be weak?
That would be weak. Yeah. So again, this is not a no relationship. It's close to being no relationship though, because it's negative 0.19. So it's a very small relationship. Okay. And it is a negative relationship. Now, we talked about earlier, why do we do this? We're looking at associations between them. But with what level of certainty would you feel confident saying, oh yeah, there's a relationship here? Probably fairly low, right? Because this is a small relationship. Now, it is still possible that this could be a statistically significant relationship, meaning you could publish it and say, hey, there is a significant association between these two variables. It all depends on how many people are in your sample. If you've got a score of negative 0.19 and you have 100 people, probably can't generalize that all that well. But if you gave that to like 1,500 people, this is likely more statistically significant. So that's the other piece we'll talk about with correlation is that, it's one thing to show is a positive or negative. It's one thing to show if it's strong or weak, but ultimately it needs to be statistically significant, meaning we did not get this data because of random error. This is because there's truly an association between these two variables. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Let's stop for right here for today. Any questions about content of the class or what needs to be done over the next couple weeks? Okay, so Friday we will continue lecture. We will remind everyone about the qualitative research assignment, which is next week. References are due by the end of next week. Literature review is due by the end of week 9, which is 2 weeks from now or March 19th. Sound good? All right, I wish you all a very successful Tuesday morning and we'll see you Friday. Bye.